Hello and welcome to Upstage Downstage.
With me, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And me, Stephen Rees, seated in a cheap seat. This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen, things we've liked and may not have liked, giving our complete unprofessional and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew, take a seat and let's raise that curtain.
We saw this touring production at the Leicester Curve on the 29th of April 2022. This play, written by Harold Pinter, premiered in 1965 at the Aldwych Theatre, London. So Richard, what's it all about?
Teddy, a professor in an American university, returns to his childhood home accompanied by his wife, Ruth, to find his father, uncle and brothers still living there. In the subsequent series of encounters, life becomes a barely camouflaged battle for power and sexual supremacy, fought out with taut verbal brutality.
So with all that said, let's set the scene! So Richard, what was your first impressions of the set and the layout of this production that we saw?
Well, at first you walked into a auditorium that literally had the curtains closed. So you weren't allowed, in a way, to see the set until
there was
the production started. No peeping at all.
No, not allowed.
And I think that helped sort of... It put you in the sense of the unknown. You didn't know what you were going to see until the actual production started. Traditionally, I mean, a lot of theatre now, they use a lot of open stage, open curtain preset where you walk into a room where there's already the set in the scene, as it were, and you didn't have that in this production. And I think that sort of lent it very much to a Pinter production, shall we say, where it held back until you needed to see the set.
And then when we did see the set, I was bowled over. This was a stunning set. This was one of the best sets I've seen for one that didn't change around.
Yes.
It was just a static set of one place, one time frame.
It was static.
Very classic.
It was very classic, but it was also very imposing. The set seemed to be enhanced in such a way where the staircase at the back of the stage, you were basically presented with a front room in a grand house in London, a Victorian townhouse.
And they'd taken the wall out, didn't they? So it was like the hallway and the lounge in one.
Definitely, basically. Yeah. So, but you'd got a staircase at the back that led up to the upstairs.
It was never ending.
Never ending, but it was just exaggerated that little bit more, so it felt like the entire stage was the room, including the back of the stage, which is literally one whole wall with wallpaper disappearing off up into the top of the stage,
all the way up to the rafters. And like you say, with the staircase, they made full use of that staircase for those particular scenes, which we'll talk about later. Which encompassed the pauses of a typical Pinter play as well, and they're capturing the essence of the drama and the suspense.
One thing you couldn't see,
step coming down.
And one thing you couldn't see was the front door.
No,
even though there was a front door built and it was made and it had stained glass in it, you never saw it on stage. But on exiting the theatre, we sort of got a glimpse into the back of the stage, and you could see the actual stained glass windowed front door was all built and actually was used all the way through the production, and just had the elements of a... It was a post Second World War, wasn't it? But it... First World War. I'm going to say
post First World War. That's it, because they were talking about
late 20s.
Somebody didn't go into war.
Yes,
that's it. Yeah, so it's got the furniture of the sideboards being that Art Deco-ish,
very 20s, sort of 20s 30s crossover. Really, it's a sort of
everything on stage was utilised, or it held a purpose. So the drinks cabinet had drinks in the cupboards, and also it's where they put the tea caddy and the cups, and it held a light, and on the other end you had the radio that held that along with the lamp.
Radio and the gramophone, basically it was a built-in record gramophone within the radio. You
had a sofa, and then you had a chair, and then you had two chairs and a table, and at the back you had a dresser.
It was an upright sort of cloak room.
Yes. Put their hats and their coats. So basically, this set only had what it needed to have. There was no clutter.
No.
It was simple and stylish.
And just staged right, you had a window that was just offset into the actual scenery.
Yeah, which would have been the main living room window.
Yeah, and on the then stage left, you had a just a pair of double doors that would open into the
dining
next
room.
room.
Yeah,
so it sort of led you in to believe the room was bigger than just this one room. You felt like you were part of a house rather than just that room.
How did you feel the space was used for the scene changes and everything else? Oh, do you know what we need to mention? The beginning of the play. There was a humming. There was
well, at first there was some music that was very 1920s 30s playing, and then all of a sudden it changed.
And then there was this humming, and I wasn't sure if they were grinding coffee beans in the cafe,
or it was almost factory or machine noise, or
constant like that. And then
it got louder, progressively louder throughout as people were sitting down.
Yeah, the lights went down, the curtains open, it was all dark, and then bang.
There was a definite change of the sound effects. Basically created this like shock element where you had to then focus on stage,
and it did that for the second act as well.
Yeah, and it also did that throughout scene changes.
Yeah,
which had that sort of shocking element to almost keep you engaged.
And the good thing about the scene changes I found was they did it quickly.
Yes,
lights off, an actor moved into position within the matter of seconds, and then bang, lights back up again. There was no faffing about.
No
frailing, looking for where I need to be or whatever. It
but there was
almost in the moment, bang, bang, bang.
They almost used it to focus on a certain character at a certain position.
To emphasise that
there was
scene.
One part of the sort of scene change where people walked off to where they needed to be, but then there was another little blip of where they focused on somebody to then draw focus to the next part of the part of the scene.
Yes, and nobody, even though the set was grand and large, it did not feel at all in any way, shape or form that the actors, whoever it may have been in each scene, if it was one person, two people or three, it never felt as if they were lost on stage.
No.
They felt that it might have just been stage presence that they had, but it didn't feel as if it was too big for them.
You felt like they lived there. You felt like it was their space and it felt lived in and it was their house, and I think that, and there was no hesitancy on where to walk on stage. It was like they knew every inch of that stage.
I'd also say with the tone and the colours of the set, it was very much like a dull, not a dark green, but a dull greenish bluish. The set looked murky and cold. It made the impression like it wasn't inviting, it wasn't a warm place, but I think that is symbolic for the kind of characters and the place that it was and that they lived in. It was very cold, like you wouldn't want to be there, or why would you be there? And I think that,
but it was a very male environment as well. The way they lived, you could tell there was a lot of men lived in that building where they didn't have the woman's touch in a way.
Yeah, there was no warmth.
Because there was talk of like no mother element anymore.
So whilst watching this Pinter play, I knew his style because I'd read up and studied The Caretaker and the birthday party that he's done. And so I knew exactly what I was expecting, but I'm not quite sure it was felt amongst a lot of the audience, because I'm not sure a lot of the audiences came back for the second act. But this is typical. The way it was done was true to the Pinter feel and the kind of show that you're going to see. With the kind of how it was executed was to the letter. They filled in the pauses specifically, and whilst we've seen a play where they've utilised pauses and it looked amateurish and like they forgot the lines, when they utilise the pauses for this, for a Pinter production, there's a reason why they've paused, and for the actor was then to find out why and how to generate that reaction to those pauses. But also through viewing this, I wasn't quite sure what it was about, because I didn't do any research.
No.
I haven't read it.
I haven't personally.
So I was trying to work out what was the point of them being there. What did they want? What was their needs? And it didn't occur to me until the very end that this whole piece, I don't know what else has been written about it, but it seemed to me like this was about the homecoming of not the characters Teddy and Ruth coming home, but the coming home of a matriarchal figure.
Yeah.
The female, because they're missing the mother.
Yeah.
They're missing the wives and the girlfriends. They don't have that.
No.
Or whatever. And when it finished and she sat down in that chair, they all had a reason, or it symbolised their connection to a female in the house, or matriarch. So the father, played by Keith Allen, Max, he was pleading with Ruth in a way where you could picture him pleading with his wife. And the uncle was dead on the floor. So does that mean he was dead to the wife who passed on, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Joey was leant over her knees in a sort of a mothering way, like a childlike figure.
Yeah.
Whereas Lenny was stood over by her side, watching over her in a protective way.
Definitely.
And that symbolised probably their relationship with the mother that isn't there.
Yeah, exactly. And
by this new lady coming in.
It was like, I mean, I also picked up on the writing where I think that a lot of the sons were products of more than one male. So they've never had apart from that mother that's now left them, they've never had a true sort of relationship with other people in their lives. They needed that matriarch at home. You touched on people apparently leaving in the interval. I mean, that may be down to people wanting to see Matthew Horn in a comedic role because of the Catherine Tate side of his acting and the things he's done on comedy with James Corden as well, and Gavin and Stacey. So that may have contributed to why they left, because it wasn't a production.
It had funny moments. Yes, it's not a comedy.
It wasn't a comedy. It's not a farce. It wasn't a production that it was situational comedy, but the comedy was in the writing, but there was a lot of build up, and there was more drama in it. It wasn't every second there was a comedy moment, or you weren't roll about laughing. It was part of the play.
Oh, I wouldn't say this was in any way a situational comedy. I think the comedy arrived from the characters rather than the situation.
Yeah.
But it wasn't solely for the purpose of it being comedy. This was very much like the set depicted. It made me feel like cold and not wanting to be there. And I think this is where the idea of the ugly theatre, the grotesque theatre comes in, because you're viewing these characters that you don't like. You instantly probably don't like how they speak, how they talk, how they treat each other, how, especially all the males, how they treat females like some piece of meat that they're just going to sleep with, and they're there to cook and clean for them, or whatever. You know, it's very much the psychology of abuse.
Yeah, definitely.
And how they treat people. And you get a sense of...
It's almost a gang culture as well. It was like a ganging up on that one person in a nice... It's hard to say, but there was no harshness in that gang culture. It's just that many people in one room fulfilling their needs, basically.
It's probably the equivalent of saying all the males were chauvinistic. In a way, this day and age, you'd probably say it's not as if the men that are in this play are misogynistic in any way. They're more chauvinistic with their approach to female women that they know, either that being the girlfriends, where anyone can have a go, a sexual object, or exploiting them, putting them in like prostitutes. And it also brings in a element of a class system as well with this, where we're looking at these are the lower class. Do you think it was well directed?
Yes.
It was directed by Jamie Glover, who's an actor in his own right.
I think it was directed really well and true to the sort of Pinter way.
It was very thorough. You could tell that this actor, the director, Jamie Glover, knows Pinter, knows how to act. But also, I would say he was an actor's director.
Yes,
he knows how to direct actors and what they want from the text.
It was really interesting because he talked about pauses, and he held... The way it was directed was he made people pause for just that length of time that was slightly awkward, so it felt real.
It felt suspenseful as well.
It was like almost the intrigue and the...
Because you can use a pause for suspense as to what's going to happen, but also to utilise the pauses for comedic effect.
Yeah.
Something happens, we're seeing this woman, because in one particular scene they're all talking about Ruth, basically, and then they stop talking because we see her walk down. Now, because the stairs are excessive with these stairs... Nobody spoke. We just watched her walk down slowly, step by step by step, until she got to the bottom before she spoke. Now, an inexperienced actor or a director would panic.
Yes.
Oh my God, there's a gap here.
Silence. It's too silent.
I can't handle this. But that's where you utilise on understanding Pinter.
Definitely.
As to...
But it's also a way to seduce the audience into the piece. Yeah. It's to draw you in, and if it's done wrong,
you're wanting to find out more. Moving on now. Do you know what we're here for? I think we're
here for the drama.
So, Richard, was there any outstanding performances with this one?
I mean, overall, the casting was exceptional, as in they all had their parts and they all played their characters really well. I don't think there was a bad one in the bunch, to be quite honest, because for me, Joey, I mean, some people would watch the cast and watch the production and see Joey as being that character that doesn't really say a lot. He doesn't really say. He's a boxer. He's sort of there all the time. However, that part is just as important as the main part. And one thing I would say is, because, say, Matthew Horn was in it, people would associate that with a really good actor and would say that he was the best out of all of them. But I felt that they all blended really well, where nobody upstaged anybody. I think they all performed their characters really well.
I'd second that, actually. I think Keith Allen suits Max
Definitely,
really well.
Really well.
You know, so can I say that he was outstanding? Well, it's slightly difficult because he's that kind of role. He's
definitely.
that kind of actor for that.
Yeah.
If he was playing a different role, then it's easy to find those outstanding actors.
Definitely.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
But because he was perfect for the role, I believed in him and I believed his portrayal. And he did give a strong performance. I did every single one of them. I believed in all of them. However, the reason why I can say Matthew Horn was quite outstanding was because, like you say, I'd seen him in comedy roles.
Yeah.
But he played that role of Lenny exceptionally well.
Yeah, he did.
Because of the writing and the dialogue, his character was just spot on, being completely different to what I've ever seen before. Yeah. So that's why he stands out a little bit more, because I know of him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And his portrayal was completely different than what I'd seen him in. Whereas the others, well, I've not seen them
of course not.
To compare. But every single one of them really gave a strong, solid performance.
Yeah, I think for me, they all seem relaxed into their characters. There was no element of sort of hesitation, because the pauses aren't a hesitation.
No.
The pauses are part of the script. It was the hesitation of their character, and there was none of that. It was they were all the characters on stage. You didn't think about their real names or their real people. They
knew their characters. They knew the style.
Yes,
they knew the play.
Yeah, definitely.
And what about the props and the costumes? Because sometimes we don't always talk about them.
No, and I think this is where everything on stage was used and utilised. Every little piece, everything you saw on stage was used, and
I'm pretty sure they were smoking real cigars and cigarettes.
Yes.
I don't know if it was. But...
Yeah, I mean there were even if they were herbal cigarettes or herbal cigars,
it was very convincing.
They were very convincing, and they added to the sense that this in the 30s it was a very well known fact that most people smoked. It was part of culture.
Well, you were odd if you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I felt with the smoke and the use of the smoking, buildings were soaked in nicotine. Wherever you went in those days, it was, it wouldn't be surprised if all the walls were yellow anyway, because that was part of the culture of life. It was coal fires, it was smoke. There was no central heating. There was no, people lived in that way at all times. So it was just part of like making a cup of tea. They'd light a fag up. It was that sort of. It was that.
And you
element.
saw with the smoke, it just went straight up.
Yeah.
So it didn't disperse into the audience or anywhere else. So
it just became part of the. It almost became part of the scenery where they were in a haze of smoke, and that gave you that feeling. As it might have not been intentional, however, it felt intentional.
Well, because the back wall was just so long.
Yeah.
Because it just went continually up, and then the stairs going up as well.
Yeah.
All you saw was the smoke being lit, and you saw it just float all the way above their heads, going
into
up
the
and
sky.
up and up, straight up
into the upstairs,
in
and
one
it just
linear
disappeared.
movement.
Yeah, and even if somebody was smoking at one side of stage or the other, it still went up to that central point, and it looked really it became part of that production.
Now moving on to our final segment.
What the tech is this?
Richard, what do we think about the sound and the lighting and all that jazz?
Well, all I'll say is if anybody wants to know how to produce a play and be very specific in lighting and sound that feels real and just subtle to the point of you just feel like you sat in that front room with them. I think, the day and night changes by the lighting, just so many simple things, and the sound as well. The sound, I'll talk about the sound first because there was sound changes there was some stuff that was done real. So some of the sound effects were done very Victorian style, where you'd got doors shutting and things off stage being rustled in boxes, where it sounded like the cutlery was, and washing the dishes, and things were happening. But the doors opening and shutting was a real door, so it had that natural sound. There was no unnatural
elements of the sound outside,
of course,
on the street
definitely
as well.
But also two elements of the sound outside. You could almost hear a muffled version of the odd car going past, because we're in the 30s. There weren't that many cars around, but you'd have the odd car going past. But then when the door was opened, it was slightly more. There was more noise, and it expanded that world beyond those windows and that door. And then with the sound effects on the the build up to the opening of the production and in the interval, and then in the scene changes where there were sharp shocks of sound. There was nothing grand, but it was a sharp shock of heavy noise that just like almost white noise, but with a aggressiveness.
I think that leads with the coldness and the unpleasantness of what you're watching. So it's like, bang, this is this scene. Take it in. Bang, this is the next scene. This is what this is. It just left you.
It sucked you in.
Adds in, and it adds into that unnervingness of sort of exciting but intrigued.
Definitely,
because you had to pay attention.
Yeah, it refocused you every time. It was like a little short, sharp shock that got you back into the next scene. Lighting wise, I'd say it was just done in such a calm way. Even to the element of there was a big ball glass light, very Art Deco, above the stage, and it was done in effect of that would be the only electric light, as well as two lamps in the room. They'd even put some haze on the back wall to make it look like that light was creating that glow. But also, when they went to a nighttime scene, all the lights were off, and then somebody opened a door at the top of the stairs, and there was just that little bit of light leak, and it'll just be a door or something built upstairs where when they open that door, that light naturally comes through, so it actually looks...
attention to detail in every aspect. The sound, the light, the set, the costumes,
the window
props.
from the outside when the sun came in. There was one scene in the morning that was an early morning scene, and the light just came leaking through the window, through the breakup of the natural window. There was no gobos in sight. There was no focused lights to create a shadow on the floor. It came through that window.
And also, when they opened the front door, you actually got embossed onto the back wall. The reflection of the light as it moved.
Yeah, exactly. Because that had stained glass in as well, you could see a little tiny ripple. There's nothing focused about it, but that's how it would look when the light naturally comes through.
So a big shout out to Joanna Town, who was a lighting designer on this one.
Definitely.
And I suppose Liz Ashcroft, the designer for the set. This was amazing. Totally. This is how it should be done. If you're going to do a classic piece, this is how to set the scene.
And this is the approach you have to take with any theatre. It's like, if you're gonna do it well. And it was obvious that they were very restrained in how they approached this, and they were very specific, because that's what this needed. It has got to enhance the cast, and it did that.
Yes, and I think we ought to give a shout out to the sound designer, Max Pappenheim.
Yes,
I think I pronounced your name right. I think I have, but this was the A-team behind this show.
It was.
It really was superb.
Definitely.
Do you think there was any technical issues on the night?
I didn't notice any.
No, nothing
I
wrong
think
or
because
anything.
it was so intense, I think you would have seen anything go wrong.
Yeah. My only gripe, we're going to see this production, would be the rustling of sweets in the audience. Honest to God. The woman next to me, she opened up a handbag. I thought she was getting a knitting out.
Yeah, exactly.
She was like rustling, looking for stuff.
Fidgeting.
Yeah. And this is the kind of play where you need to concentrate and you need to look at what they're doing. I mean, we were sat at the back row.
Yeah, we were fixed, you know.
Yes, and everyone was coughing, moving the seats, or they were fidgeting around because of all the seats in the curve. They were all on one track, so when somebody's moving and bouncing up and down, your seat's moving and bouncing around as well. So
you're just aware that other people are fidgeting, and it's a distraction.
Yeah, and with all the pausing as well, there is a lot of coughs.
But I think that's the thing with a Pinter play. Some audiences are so used to just watching TV at home, and they go to watch something like this.
This is not your Love Island kind of production. This
is very. I mean, you could have compared it to say Big Brother, because you're literally staring at one room for the whole production, and it is a very much a stuck in a box production. But that's the whole point. You know, you're seeing something change all in the one room. There's no movement in it. You know,
and also I would say the way it's done, you're like the audience members or voyeurs.
Yes,
of what is happening.
You're very
on
fly
stage.
on the wall. It's almost like you're in that. You're on
yes,
in
but
that room.
It's done in it's made to be that you are distanced from this production, and for you not to warm to it or like it in any way, it's like a gross, disgusting sort of a thing, even the topics or whatever.
It's almost like you're watching an interview in an interview room with behind the glass, where you can watch it and you can listen, and you're not allowed to leave in a way, and and that's the whole point, you know.
Yeah. Now for our ratings, as we say,
call this a show.
So, Richard, what's your final thoughts to sum up this show of The Homecoming?
Well, it's the first time I've seen this production, and I've not really heard of The Homecoming, so I thought it was a very thought-provoking piece of theatre, because I think you forget that in that era, things like this happened, and you forget that this is something that would have gone off. And I think because it was a retrospective written piece from the 60s, it was done to have impact.
Yes, I think this is, of the time, quite grotesque and brutal.
Yeah.
With its approach. I like the fact that stylistically it's done with the audience in mind to be distanced.
Yeah.
And that every part of this production had been gone through with a very fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
And attention to detail is spot on. And I cannot fault this production at all.
Not at all.
I'd imagine this is pretty much how it would have been done when it was first done.
Yeah, and I think it's a production that goes there. It makes you, towards the end, it makes you feel awkward, and it makes you question things, which is what a production like this is meant to do.
Yeah, it's quite thought-provoking on how you treat women, especially.
Yeah.
Or
if you come out of it feeling uncomfortable, the writer's done his job.
Yes,
because it makes you realise what went off.
And I really like the dialogue.
Yeah. There was an intensity that it's hard to explain unless you see it.
Yeah, quite poetic.
Yeah, definitely.
In that way. So, our scoring system here for this one, Richard. On a scale of 1 being complete cabbage and 10 being supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, what are you going to give this one, please?
I would give it a 9, because I feel that it was intense. It was a piece of theatre that not everybody's going to like, but I think it provoked thoughts that a lot of other productions don't do, and I think that says a lot. So for me, it definitely deserves a 9 for the performances and the efforts that went involved. I'd probably not give it a 10 just because I didn't get up on my feet and I didn't sort of applaud it in that way. So that's why I go for a 9, but that's only because that's the type of theatre it is. It doesn't leave you to stand up and clap, because you're still trying to process what you've seen. So that's where I'm going.
I understand that, which is why I'm going to score this production of The Homecoming a 10. Simply because I can't fault any piece of this.
No.
I can't fault the writing. I can't fault the direction.
No.
The sound, the lighting, the props, the costume, everything for this play was spot on.
Yeah.
And if at any time I felt unnerved or awkward or suspenseful or felt weird about it, that's because of the style of the play, which means for what Hal Pinter intended to do, he's achieved that, and so has Jamie Glover in making me feel that way towards this show.
And still doing.
Exactly. Now, that being said, even though I gave it a 10, would I come and see this show again? No.
And I agree with that.
Simply because I think everyone needs to go and see a Pinter play, especially if they're studying drama or acting in it. I don't want to waste my time going to see a play that I've already seen.
Yes.
I want, especially unless it's going to entertain me in a different way.
Yeah.
If I want to see another Pinter play, then that's different.
Yes.
But I think these are the kind of plays that I'd only want to see once.
Yes.
I've had my little homecoming fix.
Yeah.
I won't want to see it again, but that's not to discredit the people involved or the play itself.
Not at all.
It's definitely one to see.
I totally agree with that.
So if you haven't seen it, and it does come up in the future, go and see it.
Yeah.
So Richard, what sound effects are you going to give this one, please? So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
Well, it's got to be a standing ovation. It couldn't be anything else. As I said before, I may have not stood up in the audience and gave my applause, but that's only because I was still processing what I've just seen. So, yeah, it's time, it's needed, and that's a standing ovation from me.
Agreed, and I kept processing it all the way home. So, for that, it's a standing ovation, and yes, agreed. So there we are. That's our discussion of The Homecoming. We hope you found it insightful,
if not entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing the new production of The Rise and Fall of Little Voice,
Boeing,
and Blood Brothers. That's it for this week, folks.
If you'd like to drop us a message, please email us at upstagedowstagepod@gmail.com. Remember, you can always join in the chat to share with us your views on a production.
Also, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.